Within humanity, at the dawn of the age of the Imperium, we have become well aware that mankind has deviated from what had previously been understood as the peak of our evolution. The Age of Strife, and arguably in the time before, although, due to the Shroud of Time, specifics of the Golden Age are now likely forever lost to us, we saw the emergence of the Psyker, the human who is able to connect with the warp itself and channel it into the materium. This ability, though, is not one many view favourably, not even in the 41st millennium. For the psychic human is still greatly feared as a potential breach point for the horrors that exist within the dark, unknowable void space, known to your average layperson as the warp. Psykers are often unaware of their own powers, especially early on, and some may merely even have the ability to just read the minds of others, to move objects in a simple way, and minor abilities of this nature. Emergent psykers may unwittingly kill others, not understanding the power within them. The most feared are the psykers who begin to experiment with their abilities, not understanding the danger that is posed to them, allowing themselves to potentially become a gateway for the nightmarish demons of the Immaterium. Such individuals could potentially cause the loss of entire worlds for the Imperium, so it is the role of Inquisitors and the Emperor's Sisters of Silence to hunt down and extract these rogue psykers, either for Imperial training and conditioning to become a sanctioned psyker of the Imperium, or for others what awaits them are the, let's say, miscellaneous other roles, read Psychic Battery and or Destruction. Psykers are graded on a power scale known as the Assignment, and for those who are classified in the upper scale range, their future can either be one of permanent isolation or destruction, if that were even possible. Some psykers in the higher grading of Beta and Alpha are so powerful their permanent destruction may not even be possible by ordinary members of the Imperium. Immediate destruction, if possible, is usually the default choice by members of the Inquisition. It's actually questioned even if humans can truly achieve the upper echelons of these scales of power, but for those who are suspected, they usually have long since lost their minds. And thankfully such individuals are extremely rare. Only Xenos are truly known to possess these powers, such as the Tyranids, and they're believed to be able to cope with this grade of psychic power, although their bestial nature means they are likely not truly aware of the power they hold within them, much like a snake or spider may not be fully aware that its venom is considerably more powerful than is actually necessary for the small prey that it hunts. Most focus for the Imperium is on the upper half of the assignment scale, as there are far more active psykers than there are those who are dulled to psychic activity. Active psykers also do usually pose more of an ongoing active risk for Imperial stability. At the opposite end of the spectrum, however, you'll begin to find individuals who create a steadily calming, neutralizing, and negative effect on psychic powers and general warp activity. These humans or beings are graded across these 5 levels designated as being psychically inert, but we are more concerned with the 2 grades below this, within the lowest tier of psychic activity. These individuals are graded as Psi or Omega, and they are known as the blanks, the nulls, the pariahs. They are negatively psychic in their activity, and they have no presence in the warp. It is said that they have an invisible field of negative psychic activity around themselves, an aura, a bubble, and for ordinary humans, they are uncomfortable even to be in the presence of these individuals. People will feel as if their skin is crawling, they will have dull headaches, and a feeling of being generally unsettled and perhaps claustrophobic when in the presence of a null or a blank. For someone who actually has some psychic activity on the assignment scale, being then in the same room as a null will become painful, perhaps even debilitating. Only the hardened individuals such as Inquisitors, Sisters of Battle Astartes, and Grey Knights will be able to withstand the discomfort of a null in their presence, and even then, it's likely an experience that they would very likely opt to do without. For the hunters of these pariahs, this can actually be a relatively straightforward task comparative to other investigations. Nulls are said to occur anywhere below 1 in a billion average humans, so on any hive world, you're probably looking at very likely below double digits of individuals at any given time. The prospect of finding them may seem like the proverbial needle in a haystack. This is made far easier when the hay becomes very unhappy with the needle and forces it to live outside of the haystack, because then it's a simple job of just checking around the area of the haystack and you've found your needle. Pariahs, as the name quite literally suggests, are often shunned and cast out, if not fully exiled, by their communities. For the null individual, this is likely traumatic, for they will not understand just what it is about themselves that makes others hate and despise them so. Unlike the psyker, they will be unlikely to have any actual abilities, so most are very confused and bitter about the fact that they've been chastised so badly through no seeming fault of their own. At an undeveloped level, these undiscovered nulls are probably not especially dangerous to ordinary humans or anybody. They would just have had an air around them of being bad news, emotionless, just horrible to be around generally. Likely they never were able to make friends easily, perhaps even cast out by their own family and left to live alone and homeless. On worlds which still exist in a more feudal state, they may have suffered far more or less, existing as hermits outside of their community, or potentially they were executed similarly to the psyker for unspecified sorcery and so on, with maybe bad events blamed on them as being a pariah of the town. For the Inquisitor, however, locating these individuals, as I mentioned, becomes easier because of all this. They simply have to search through the lower levels of a hive, asking the locals for loners, strange hermits who nobody has any time for, or worse, on feudal planets and the like. Simply searching for hermits and banished individuals can again be relatively straightforward, comparative to, say, finding a specific person within a hive city, a much more difficult task. Once, though, a null individual has been found, very much like the psykers who are detected across the galaxy, they will be collected and returned to Terra via the black ships of the Sisters of Silence, who are themselves an all-female order of blanks. Similarly to the Custodes and Inquisition, they remain largely autonomous, although technically they come under the banner of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. They by and large answer to no one other than the Emperor, as they answered directly to him since the dawn of the Age of the Imperium. As the Imperium grew during the Crusade, more and more nulls were being shipped back to Terra and then deposited within the depths of laboratories under the care of the Mechanicus. The ever-increasing number of pariahs quickly began to create a problem. The concentration of these null individuals meant that they began to cast a psychically nullifying shadow, and to such a degree it even began interfering with the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse created by the Emperor to allow all ships to navigate via its light. Essentially, the Imperium had created their own unintentional shadow in the warp, that is, similar to that of the Tyranids. Although in the case of the Tyranids, this is caused more by a psychic static than a null field. Other Xenos like the Necron, though, have also created psychic null fields in recent times, such as their Pariah Nexus. The High Lords of Terra, and in general the administrators of various Imperial departments, became exasperated at this danger present in the pariahs and wanted them all immediately destroyed, and furthermore that any other nulls should be hunted and executed from here on. Such was their danger to the stability of the Imperium and to warp travel. This, however, did not sit well with the Officio Assassinorum, which had been developing a means by which these nulls might be best used by the Imperium, weaponized. And they had been working with the Mechanicus to create a new breed of Imperial assassin, the CULEXUS. The Master of the Administratum would subsequently make a large display about their research departments for the pariahs being decommissioned, and many pariahs under study were indeed executed. Yet this was very much a charade. Those High Lords who had objections to the captive pariahs had felt satisfied and returned to their self-indulgent power struggles and daily petty bureaucracy. Of course, the project had not ended at all. If they had bothered to even investigate a little, they might have had the presence of mind to notice that the amount of pariahs scheduled for execution did not align with the amount being held, and those who held the most promise, the most power, and the most natural ability had been transported through a cooperative effort of the Mechanicus and the Officio Assassinorum to a new assassin temple on the edge of the galaxy. For out at the rim of the known galaxy, the Emperor's Astronomicon can barely reach. It does not extend outside the known galaxy, and so here the pariahs of the CULEXUS temple can gather without it causing disturbance to the regular order of things and running the risk of creating anxiety and a lot of questions among the administrators of the Imperium. Thinking about that though, I suppose one might argue, if this were the case, why would the Sisters of Silence, who are also nulls and blanks, being located on Luna, orbiting Terra, not also similarly create such a negative psychic field as the pariahs did? And the answer, of course, as to why this isn't a problem is, you ask too many questions, my friend. You best stick to your work. Those who had been investigating potential uses for the pariah had now seen how they might develop those powerful Omega Nulls into deadly assassins. Other uses, of course, had been seen for Nulls like the Sisters of Silence themselves and the pilots of Psi Titans. The CULEXUS Temple, though, sees an unusual concentration of psychic Nulls, and here they will be stripped of their humanity steadily before being further disciplined mentally and refined into psycho-hunting killing machines. While most assassin temples are of course highly secretive and guarded, the CULEXUS are even more so. Their assassins will remain here on their temple world for the majority of their time, but when they are deployed for short, acute missions executed with surgical precision, they will be transported out under the highest levels of security. If it were discovered that the Officio Assassinorum had been secretly harbouring an entire temple of pariah assassins, it's very likely this would create a large-level dispute and potentially destruction of the temple and its assassins. In fact, for those within the Imperium who had become aware of its existence somehow, there were those who would already see it destroyed, but these figures simply lack enough power or knowledge to be able to execute their intentions. The deployment of CULEXUS assassins is not a straightforward process due to the inherent danger in the assassin itself. This is not entirely dissimilar to the Eversor assassin, except that with the CULEXUS, the threat to others is quite different and less psychopathic. To be transported to an objective, the CULEXUS will be placed within a specially shielded ship. These transport vessels are comparable to the black ships of the Sisters of Silence, and this will help to protect those carrying the CULEXUS to its destination, but they will be additionally aided by the assassin's own war gear, specifically its helm, known as the Animus Speculum. This helm is also the weapon of the CULEXUS, but this is in fact not its most important function. Part of the research into how the Imperium might weaponize the CULEXUS led to the development of this Animus helm that would allow the CULEXUS to channel its potent negative psi energy, but also to shield the effect to protect its allies. Unusually for assassins, the CULEXUS will generally also be accompanied by a custodian who will ensure that they do not come into unnecessary contact with others and generally that they remain within the parameters of what they've been authorized to do. For clarity, this is not a member of the Custodes, it is merely a well-trained member of the Assassinorum CULEXUS Temple who understands the skills and restrictions of them to help the assassin operate in the field. CULEXUS assassins are ruthless in their pursuit of psychers. They're patient and masterful hunters, they track their prey through the galaxy and strike whenever they so choose. They kill not with bolter or blade, but with negative psychic energy and raw warp stuff that boils the blood and flays the skin of psychers just as easily as conventional weapons. They are the coldest and most unnerving of beings, their social interactions forever marked by their soulless nature, and the near isolation from human contact in which they must live. While they're generally able to mimic human emotions in the course of their duties, in fact they feel little to no emotion, a trait that can only add to their unnerving presence. Their own bodies are soulless and their minds by now have been whittled down to serve with only one function. And they're only able to achieve this through their core weapon and helm known as the Animus Speculum. This arcane device enables the assassin to unleash their null power and fulfill their purpose. The ancient technology contained within the helm allows the CULEXUS to control the scale of their null aura, releasing these safeguards when near to their foe and thus creating unfathomable levels of agony in their targets. This null aura is strong enough that even for non-psychers like say your average human most likely would collapse to the ground writhing in agony as the null aura scratches around inside their skull like a rat trying to gnaw its way out. So then let us imagine that for psychers, this feeling will be amplified hundreds, even thousands of times over. Any weak psychers will quickly lose their mind and become subdued for their inevitable death. But stronger, more disciplined, powerful, resilient psychers will likely try to cling on as long as possible, focusing whatever psychic powers they can, and some may even channel so much power their own bodies begin to fail or disintegrate as a result. Their efforts, however, will be entirely futile. In fact, this will only worsen their situation, as the CULEXUS are entirely immune to psychic powers. They are the void, the empty darkness. Psychic powers of any kind, no matter the power, are nothing to them. Beyond this, their body armor, similarly visually to the sin skin worn by other assassins, but for the CULEXUS, is known as the Etherium. This shadowy skin contains a meshed lattice of techno-arcane circuitry, which allows the null assassin to phase out of reality. This further enables the CULEXUS to pass through solid objects, walls, doors, even other beings, and more importantly pass psychic barriers. This imbues the CULEXUS with an astonishingly powerful ability to simply shift through anything that might stop them, even drift invisibly past enemies and weapons fire with impunity. And this is why, for anyone hunted by a CULEXUS, is a terrifying prospect, for there is literally nowhere to hide. While a Psyker may now be attempting to cling to the edge of reality, the CULEXUS's Ethereum also contains what is referred to as the Force Matrix, and this allows them to essentially mop up any psychic energy not being used by the Psyker. Although unobservable, it is believed that many Psykers are not especially efficient at channeling energy from the warp, and so there's always leakage. This loose energy is soaked up by the CULEXUS and can feed their suit to enhance their abilities or be channeled into their primary weapon, which is of course their unmissable statement weapon of the Animus Arcane Eye. While the CULEXUS assassin possesses this passive null aura that can be strengthened through the use of their helm, and their phase shifting makes them a terrifying prospect to neutralize psychic enemies, their true strength that will allow them to obliterate their enemy is similar to the null pilots of Psi Titans, and we all remember how terrifying Psi Titans are. I often have likened CULEXUS assassins to human-scale Psi Titans, for the concept is relatively comparable. Piloted by a null, Psi Titans focus insane levels of psychic energy and are only able to do this because the pilot is a null, otherwise they wouldn't be able to cope with the sheer power they are unleashing. And we may recall that when it came to Psi Titans, even Primarchs decided to sit that fight out. CULEXUS use their Animus to turn their Psyker foes' own psychic energy against them. The helm is a bizarre creation, both bulky and unwieldy. It's a faceplate similar to the Eversur, that of a terrifying skull form, and this bizarre construction is terrifying enough just as an inanimate object. By unleashing their null aura, it allows the assassin to cut through the fog of the Psyker and see clearly the location of the enemy. Most importantly though is the arcane eyepiece of the Animus, which will unleash blasts of negative psychic energy. The more a Psyker fights and resists, the stronger the CULEXUS can become. Unleashing psychic powers against it will fuel its Animus, and enable the assassin to focus the negative powers into an extremely powerful condensed beam of negative energy through the arcane eye, burning into their mind and their very soul, ripping and tearing it from their corporeal shell. The Psyker will be left, if there is anything left, as a burned out charred husk for whoever may come to find it in time. The CULEXUS Arcane Eye, though, is equally powerful against the demon, as these are psychic beings constructed literally from the warp itself, and so again the very presence of the CULEXUS can drain their life energies, the only notable exception being the demons of Khorne, which generally abhor the use of actual psychic powers over the physical. But lastly, for the CULEXUS in their terrifying arsenal are their Psych Out grenades. Now you might be thinking, oh yeah, just negative psychic grenades are they? Basically yes, except that they're said to contain fluids distilled with an anti-psychic agent. And where is this from? It's just from the Golden Throne itself. These are full of negative psychic energy and extremely deadly for demons and enemy psychers alike. And I'm sure that the comments will be scrambling to fill in the blanks about grenades filled with metabolic liquids distilled from the Golden Throne. But let me tell you, it won't seem so funny when one is being thrown at you in grenade form. Humanity in the 41st millennium is well aware that a rare number of humans are born with what is referred to as this pariah gene. Importantly, it should be noted that it is not believed to reference specifically an actual genetic abnormality. It's more of a figurative reference to a small differentiation between these extremely rare humans born without any psychic resonance. So what is the origin of this deviation and why does it occur? This is unknown. As many of you well know, at this point, I do not personally subscribe to the concept of retcons, and so with that in mind, I might say that within the verse of 40k, it was believed at one time that the Necron Xenos may have had some involvement with the pariah gene and humanity. This was later found to be less likely, however, it still remains an outside possibility. As I always say, some things change, some things stay the same. But what other possibilities are there for the pariah gene and humanity, if not for Xenos interference? Well, to the surprise of no one, the Emperor outlawed research into this pariah gene, which, as with many things and the Emperor, immediately makes it suspicious. Although I said the reference to genetics is much more figurative than literal, the Emperor is well known for being highly adept at genetic manipulation, and many other mysterious biological adaptations in ancient scientific fields, so who knows if the Emperor may have had a hand in this somewhere along the line. The Dark Age of technology is another possibility. We know that humanity was highly experimental during this time, and it's believed that as a species we had become focused entirely on the pursuit of science and technology as the core of our advancement. Just exactly what we were doing to ourselves and with AI during this period is extremely clouded, and there are vague suggestions of genetic adaptation to produce superhumans. So the possibility of the pariah gene originating during the Dark Age is not such an extreme possibility. For we know that those individuals that are classed as perpetuals, immortals, essentially, are also seemingly able to, if they choose, make other human perpetuals. Again, this is something of a vague term, but essentially the ability to create these strange differentiations in humans does seem to be something which can be constructed or engineered. And it's very worth remembering that much of the knowledge held by the Imperium is extremely low, even though to us it seems highly advanced compared to that of the Dark Age of technology, which was so far advanced that it is almost beyond comprehension. The main point is that through the Dark Age technology, individuals who came through this time into the period of the Imperium, there may well still be that knowledge about how the pariahs came into being, somewhere out there existing, living in the Imperium now. On the other hand, the perpetual known as Erda believes that the perpetuals were simply the next evolutionary stage for humanity itself, and similarly to the emergence of psykers during the Age of Strife, the emergence of the pariahs may simply be a reflective evolutionary stage of humanity, and that where most humans have developed an almost undetectable but minor move forward on the psychic scale, some have advanced significantly, and others, seemingly in the pariahs, have moved on the scale but in the other direction into the zone of a psychic null. The origin and importance of the pariah continues to be speculated upon, and it continues to look like it will have ever more significance into the future for humanity and the Imperium. Within the galaxy of the 41st millennium, the CULEXUS have seen an ever-increasing necessity. Psykers continue to emerge, and where necessary, the infiltration and extermination of rogue powerful psykers by a CULEXUS remains an ever-present threat. Humanity, as usual, poses the biggest threat to itself via these rogue psykers, but also of course through the lure of the warp and the traitors who have fallen into the depths of its depravity, corrupted by the eternal promises of the demons, heretics and unknown horrors beyond. Outside of these most obvious realms of operation for the CULEXUS, there is one Xenos who fears them more than any other. It should be no surprise that this Xenos is that of the Eldar, the species who since the War in Heaven has relied extremely heavily upon psychic abilities in almost everything they do. Their entire culture is built around the use of psychic power, and so for the Eldari, the CULEXUS is the true embodiment of what you might think of as the Grim Reaper. An untouchable phase-shifting darkness that stalks them without end until they are erased from existence. The Eldar fear the CULEXUS quite possibly even more than Slaanesh, for death at the hands of the CULEXUS means not just shedding the soul from the mortal body, but erasure from existence. Many will be executed without ever having been able to notify their brethren of such a killer coming for them, but some other Eldar have been able to evade the CULEXUS for a short time, and so are able to embed within their crystals an account of their final days and hours. These Eldar have described being hunted by what they suggest was a dark shadow, something stalking them relentlessly, that appears to them as a void in the skein of time, and that the Rune of Oblivion is its sign. The Eldar despise humanity for unleashing this nightmare upon them, and for the Eldar it is only further proof that mankind are a debased, ignorant species who are fumbling around in the dark with loaded guns. Yet they bother to note that this is made worse by the fact that humans appear to have realised the danger inherent in the pariahs, that the human's own body recoils and shivers in their presence, but that apparently this natural warning sign is not enough. This instinctive feeling of the danger in the null human has apparently not allowed humanity to understand the threat, and that instead we seek ways to manipulate and use this. The Eldar look down upon the Imperium and humanity for these acts of willful ignorance, but bother to note that it is a typically human characteristic and entirely predictable. Eldari, such as the Farseers, who have learned of humanity's use of the CULEXUS, describe how they have seen the human psychers, who they refer to as nearsighted seers, i.e. not Farseers, and would wish the null weapons destroyed forever as much as themselves, but that the humans are so despicable that they tell double-faced lies to one another and distract eyes elsewhere to allow these monstrous CULEXUS to hunt down those they refer to as having sight. Within the Eldar Farseers' biased descriptions lies some truth. For as we always should remember, as much as the Imperium appears to have humanity's collective best interests at heart, sometimes things do go badly awry. It's possible that nulls, pariahs, blanks pose a far greater threat to humanity than we might actually be aware, and the Eldar describes this as follows. They tried to control it with their clumsy technology, using devices which they barely comprehend to guard others against the hungering maw which serves as its spirit. To even consider harnessing such unpleasant freaks of creation is to invite disaster. I would laugh at the irony of it, were it not so offensive. The humans hunt and kill those with the gift, fearing for their safety, when their true nemesis, the real creation which will be their doom, is nurtured upon their bosom. How human that is. This thing stalks me now, and I, who have seen the birth of stars and the death of galaxies, I am afraid. Despite many Eldar fearing for the CULEXUS deeply and even wishing for their destruction, this was felt no more passionately than on the craft world of Alatok, and they hold an especially bitter ongoing feud with the Necron, more so than some other craft world. Of course, all Eldar despise the Necron, more so with this craft world, and the destruction of the CULEXUS temple ranked highly among their priorities. It's hard perhaps to describe how vast an Eldar craft world actually is. They're often described as being planet-sized, which is vague in and of itself, but it's enough to say that they are gargantuan in size. They're big enough to support entire fleets, even armadas of Eldar ships which will accompany them, and so Craftworld may appear as vast living bodies crossing the oceanic void of the galaxy, while tiny shoals of fleet fish trail along with them. Perhaps the most important thing to consider with Craftworld is that unlike a planet, Craftworld will not just use the surface area, but the entire space within as well, and thus making a Craftworld incredibly dense with Eldar. Craftworld Alatok is one of those more powerful Craftworlds, and so they decided that they would spend significant time and resources in attempting to hunt down the temple of the CULEXUS assassins. The source of this effort was one Aladrios Kolkassian, an ancient Eldar Farseer who held a bitter vendetta against the CULEXUS, for his sister had been erased from reality by one of these null freaks, and he mournfully carried her spirit stone around, her empty spirit stone. Eldar spirit stones are used to capture the soul of an Eldar to prevent it returning to the warp. These are then later placed into the infinity circuit of the Craftworld, which keeps all of the Eldar souls saved from the horror of Slaanesh, the fate which awaits those like the Dark Eldar should they ever meet true death. Aladrios would merge his spirit with the infinity circuit of Craftworld Alatok in a bid for guidance on his mission. He would reach through the billions of souls and lives to connect with a Shadow-class cruiser, the Legacy of Aldernesh. Its crew seemingly were racked with horror at what they had stumbled upon, the so-called orphan world orbiting the powerful gravity well of a singularity. The planet did not display the usual visions of past, present and future to him as a Farseer. It was a void, it was a blank, and he realised that this was what he had been searching for, the home of the human pariah assassins. He had sought this place for so long, and finally its ultimate destruction was in his grasp. Whenever Eldar Farseers or Eldar generally have a decision to make which could have profound consequences, history has taught them that they should, if they are able, to explore the realm of possibilities. This means reaching into the psychic realm through their powerful precognition and looking at the various paths of fate. How are they able to do this, or what it means relative to the galaxy as a whole, is unknown. Do they truly look into the future? How set are these things? More importantly, how changeable is the future? This reaches into the questions I've asked before, such as, even if you feel you are making a conscious choice, are you? Aladrios expected his Farsight experience to show him a new age of the Eldar, free of fear, free of these freak Null hunters, and more importantly, vengeance for the eradication of his sister. Instead, what he saw was destruction. Destruction of his people, destruction of his craft world, ruined, burning, drifting dead through space. He searched multiple possible futures. The same thing, the same. How could this be? Aladrios reached out to the ship near to the CULEXUS temple world and convinced them to retreat from the space. Yet he was haunted now by these visions. How could he be so wrong? He had to actively fight his powerful ego to crush it down and extinguish his utter frustration at having to abandon his centuries-long campaign to destroy the humans' assassin temple. The meaning of this encounter was surely deeper than he yet understood. If the Imperial humans had the power to destroy his craft world, they surely would already have done so, for no other reason than because they could. The petty, ignorant, warmongering monkey. He reasoned that the answer must be elsewhere, perhaps in the origins of the CULEXUS and the Pariahs. The Pariahs, the blanks, nulls, pose a concerning question mark for seemingly the Imperium and the Eldari. No one truly has been able to pinpoint their origin or reason for being, or for that matter, how they're able to exist while being seemingly devoid of a soul. They exist in our material realm, but repel everything about it. Mortal entities, the psychic energy that we have over time begun to realise permeates nearly everything, and that for as much as we might wish it weren't, the warp appears tied to our material space. The Necrons and the CULEXUS seem to be the only ones willing to lean in on the use of the Pariahs. Humanity has merely weaponized the Pariah, as humans do with nearly any source of power, with seemingly little real thought as to the consequences, but ever more so in the 41st millennium. When it comes to the Necron though, every sliver of information we discover as to just what they're doing only raises further questions. What the Nulls mean for the future of humanity and indeed the galaxy remains a very troubling unknown. We know though that some Inquisitors who were able to explore data in the Pariah Nexus were disturbed enough to raise urgent warnings about the threat posed to the Imperium, quoted as saying, "It's far worse than we had ever imagined." What role the CULEXUS and blank humans may have to play on the wider stage of the galaxy in the 41st millennium remains to be seen, where war will continue to rage across the empires of humanity and the psychers fear that which moves in the shadows. Unstoppable, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no force they can muster to resist. The emotionless horror of the CULEXUS assassin.